Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video, we're going to talk about the ngFor structural directive. So the syntax for ngFor, so do you remember for loops? So basically, I hope you remember the for loops. Let's just go over it really quickly. We would say something like for int I equals 0, and then I is less than a number, let's just say 10, and then I plus plus, and then we have something here where it will loop from 0 to 10 for the I, and then we'll do something right inside the brackets, right? But we also could do something else if we had a list, like for example, a list cars. We could say for string, because these are strings, car in cars, and then do something in the curly brackets. It would loop one through the next into any given iterable into, and you would be doing stuff right in these brackets, but it would loop through using the for statement. Well, in Angular, the structural directive ngFor is basically the same thing. Now, again, asterisk, so it's a structural directive, so it will determine whether it appears or doesn't appear. So in other words, whether you create an element or don't create an element. Right here, I'm using a div element and ngFor, and then closing it, and in between, I'm just going to do this, say, hello world. Let's ignore all this stuff right now. And so that's all I'm going to do for right now. So what's the let? The let is basically an input, template input variable. This is as opposed to a template reference variable. So let is basically declaring the variable car in the list cars. Notice of instead of in. Why? I'm not exactly sure why that is, okay? But that's the syntax of it, okay? The let versus var, so you could put var, okay, that's a possibility, or you could put the shorthand pound sign. Pound sign is the same thing as var, where it declares the variable right here. The difference, I'm not sure about the exact difference between the template input variable and the template reference variable. It has something to do with scoping. Scoping where the let basically involves the input element, oh, no, I'm sorry, the element in which you are including it, okay, that element only, and once you leave this element, it gets removed. So for example, in the for statement, if you have an int I equals 0, you get outside these brackets, get out, wait a minute. Okay, I'm getting there. Get outside these brackets. So printing something here, fine. Printing something in here, it deletes, it removes the I value, or it forgets the I altogether because it's outside of the scope, right? So let is the scope locally, as opposed to the var or the pound sign. It is a template reference variable, so it'll be seen outside of the element. Div isn't a good example because it doesn't seem to involve div. So div, if you put var car and then you try to print something outside of the div element, it still doesn't recognize the variable car. So I'm not exactly sure how to use that. The documentation is really not very clear about that in my opinion. So if anybody has a better idea, great, please let me know. Please leave a comment in the comment section. But otherwise, let's keep going. So let car of cars, and what it will do, it will loop through the list, one after the other, and then we will say hello world. So we anticipate we'll print hello world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Okay. Just like that. Okay. There are some other features to it also. I will reprint this out here as well. So if we remember back inside of here, the I is a counter, so we actually can count from 0 to 9 right here. When you have car in cars, you don't actually have a counter, right? You don't have a way of, unless you make a variable that says 0, 1, 2, 3 and doesn't list things. So if you want to make a numbering system, you would basically, again, semicolon, and put, again, the let I equals index. The variable I, that could be anything. I could say index equals index, whatever, but it's the equal index that says, let's start keeping track of these variables and have a counting system. So it's basically Angular's way of, with this structural directive, having a counting system inside of there. Let I, we'll put a period and space. So we can do that. So those are just built-in features for you, just to help you out. And it'll be like that, you might want to do I plus 1, so it makes it a little bit easier to read, because, most of us start with 1, even though the listing starts with 0, of course. All right? And let me see. F equals first, let L equals last. Those are basically, let's just do them. So these are basically bools right here and right here. So it will say, when it loops through, is this the first value? If yes, it is, true. If it's not, false. Is this the last value? If yes, true. If no, false. Okay, so there's basically just bools throughout the process. So the first one was F. First one was F, that's true. And then everything else false, as opposed to last, that's false, and everything's false except the last is true. And let odd, even. So odd. Hang on. There we go. Let's just put odd. We could do even as well. Basically says is in the index, is this an odd or an even? This is even. So is it odd? False. It'll be false. This is deceptive, okay, because we did this. So in the index, is it an odd number or an even number? 0 is an even number, so it's false. 1 is an odd number, so true. And it goes back and forth. And even is just the opposite, of course. Okay, so that's pretty much ngFor in a nutshell. It just loops through things. If you have a list of things you want to list, you can. You can always write car, use that variable right there. We'll delete that. You can always do that. For the record, in any given element, you cannot have 2 structural directives. You can only have 1 at any given time. If you want to do something right here, you can always have a new element. Just say, have a new div element. You can always do div ngIf even. Let's just put even. E and in between here we'll put car. All right, so why don't we try that? So should it do? Well, if it is going to be, I'll remove that to make it a little bit simple. If we're going to do this correctly, we're going to say, let's loop through this, and of the ones that I want to list, only if it's an even number. So 0, that's even. That's odd. That's 1. 0, 1, 2. Okay, got to count here. That's true because that's even. So it'll list every other one, and then it'll print it because it's a structural directive. It'll create the element. If it's false, it will not create it and will not list the Toyota, the Mercedes, or the Tesla. Okay. Good. I think that was correct. I think I called that right. Okay, there we go. So you cannot mix it in any given element, in ngFor, ngIf, but you can always make elements in between there, as long as they don't, you can have multiple attribute directives, but we'll go over that in the future, but not structural directives. Just something to keep in mind. Okay? One last thing, there is something called a track by, which is another option here. I don't really know much about that, and I can't really figure it out very well. Again, I'm not clear on the documentation. It does give some examples, but it's not very clear to me. It basically is as a means of optimization. So for us, in the beginning stage, it's not going to be a real big deal. If we make millions of lines of code, that would be awesome. But if we have something where we need to optimize a little bit better, we can use that feature. But for right now, since it's not clear, I'm not going to go over it. Maybe we'll learn it sometime in the future. Okay? Thanks.